Well, let's see, 402. I guess I'll start with some introductions because I think we're ready to start the panel. Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we'll start going. Of course, if any of the attendees have questions, there's a button on the bottom for Q&A. We'll get to those as they come in and we'll get things going. Thank you everybody for coming for our penultimate panel for the 2021 Comic Fest, Mission Viejo Library Comic Fest. We've had a great week. We started on Monday and now we're all the way up into Sunday, and we're got one more panel after this at 6:30 with the authors Gretchen McNeil and Zoraida Cordova. But right now we have three fantastic comic book creators here. We have, let's alphabetically, we have Nicole Andelfinger, down with the colored hair, in the background with the Lumberjanes. She's famous for writing, of course, Lumberjanes and working on Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal and Adventure Time comics, among other things. Alphabetically, then we go to Jackie Ball, who's giving you a bow. And she's great because she wrote Goldie Vance comic books, which are kind of really cool. I read those last year. And then also Welcome to Wanderland, which I have to pronounce because I always say Wonderland in my head. And if you've ever been to any Disneyland or any other theme park, definitely check that one out because it's magic and great. And then, of course, finally, at the very end of the alphabet, we have our friend Marv Wolfman. Marv, I don't necessarily have the time to talk about all his credits, but he's super famous for doing this New Teen Titans, Crisis on Infinite Earths. In fact, I think I have my issues here. So, and then and was it Superman and Man is the new one you did last year, right?
Man and Superman.
Yeah, which we got at my library, and also little bits in like the Robin 50th anniversary issues and things like that. So, and I love his Raven short miniseries also. So with that, welcome all. Thank you for coming. It's been a long time in the works, and we're now finally here. First, like I said, thank you all. One thing I always wondered with comic book writers, and especially with comic books, is kind of the whole process of the idea first or the art first. You know, of course, you guys are not necessarily artists, but do you think in an artistic manner when you're coming up with your ideas, or are you just writing a story out and then you're kind of passing it off to an editor or an artist, and then they come back with the ideas? I know, does that make sense? Jackie, you're shaking your head. Could you maybe expand on that?
I have a tendency to think very visually. So even when I was kind of writing in school and stuff, writing more just like prose fiction, it was always very, very visual. And then at a certain point, I'm sure that I will talk some about my day job, which is theme park design. I am still a writer and creative director there, but there's a lot of thinking three-dimensionally of where things are going to go. But there are also, like, sometimes there are performance-based things and things like stunt shows where there's a lot of like needing to sort of visualize what people are going to be doing. So when I'm writing a comic book, I, at least so far, think that my artists have appreciated this. I know that this might be, I tend to write very, very clear as I possibly can be, panel descriptions that are action based, that are sort of, because I tend to have a strong image in my head of what somebody's doing, if they're doing an actiony moment, because I have a lot of, with Goldie, there are chase scenes. Sometimes it's like car races or sort of street chases, that kind of thing. And I do tend to have, as I'm writing it, like a really strong visual sense of what I want it to look like. And so rather than hand it off to the artist and then be like constantly back with 1,012 notes for artists who are working their butts off constantly. I want to try and be like as really clear as possible up front of like, okay, like this is a, you know, she's doing a punch pose. Sometimes I will have something in my head that's sort of like, oh, it's, you know, and then she punches her out of the frame like Hulk did to Thor in the Avengers. Sometimes there will be a very clear like frame of pop culture reference for me, but yeah, I try to like when it's in there, just like get it on the page as much as possible because I don't want to be note crazy.
Any other thoughts, maybe Nicole? Do you have an idea?
I mean, it's very much I want to just say ditto because it was such a good answer, but it's that balance of having a very clear idea of how much space is actually on a page, and so not putting 2 whole paragraphs worth of a monologue on a page because the artist is probably going to reach through the screen and then kill me because their entire art would be covered up by a speech panel. But it's just sitting there and knowing like, okay, this is what's I want to see on the page, but this is how much space the page is, because at the end of the day the writing's important, but the art's also really important, and you want to give that artist that moment to shine, and in a lot of cases the art will often replace the need for words. So
and Marv, you've probably worked with more artists than anybody these days. Do you have to like sometimes cater your work for different artists, or ones that you might know better that are easier to work with or less easy?
If I've never worked, by the way, I also can just say ditto. You pretty much covered everything, including theme parks, because I've written a bunch of those too. When you're dealing, I started as an artist, not a good one, but I went to the High School of Art and Design. I have my degree at college is art. So I see things totally visually. And when I'm working on a comic, when I come up with a situation, for instance, say it's a character-driven scene, my first thought is, how do I make it visual? How do I say the same things in an exciting way? Because the most boring thing in the world is just seeing faces panel by panel, after panel, after panel, after panel. You can do that really well for a couple pages, but you can't do it on a regular basis. So I'm always trying to think of how to make a scene visual, how to make it interesting to the audience. And then maybe even before any of that is how to make it interesting to the artist. We have to figure out where, if I am working with an artist, I know it's simple. If I'm not, I try to give them the definitions of what I'm doing, explaining why the scene is. It's more important to me to explain why I'm doing the scene this way than it is what the scene is. Because if he gets into my thinking, they can go off on their own way and make it even more exciting, but they'll know why that scene is important and they'll know how to play off that scene.
Great. I forgot at the very beginning to do a little housekeeping, so to speak. If you guys stick around, the attendees stick around until the end, we have a raffle, a drawing for some good giveaways. So let me see if I can do this and share my screen and you guys can see this, and then we'll get back to the questions. Share screen. So first off, we have a hardcover edition of DC's Rebirth. You guys see that, right? It's signed by Jeff Johns. And then also we have this fantastic Mondo poster of the Avengers. It was for their 10th anniversary. Loki's going to be pretty cool in the next couple months, I guess. And then finally, we have this Gretchen McNeil novel, hashtag murder funding, sharp murder funding. So those are just 3 things that you can win at the end of this program. We'll pick 3 of our attendees for that. So thanks for the
Can we join that raffle?
The Loki poster was great.
Yeah. We have a friend at Marvel Productions who's in the PR department there, and they always give us these great incentives. So anyway, back to these questions. This will be just kind of random out of my head, unfortunately, but I was also thinking, we were talking about how people actually get into writing comics and how they can, express themselves and maybe even make a career out of that. Any of the pits and traps and foibles and education and ideas on how maybe a budding writer can try to become a professional comic book writer? Let's start with you, Nicole. If you have an idea.
I mean, I always have to say, anybody who wants to go into writing, that it's understanding how important your deadline is going to be. Always finish something. Always try to finish it on time. Or yeah, it's just timelines are always so important. And I mean, I'll be quite honest, I do work a day job on top of this. I do have a full-time corporate job.
Okay.
That's best described as emails. So that's really where I get, my health insurance and stuff from. But it's just understanding that it can be really rough. If you're feeling super down about it, you're probably not alone, because a lot of us do this for a living and still feel super down about it.
But one of the neat things, though,
it's fun, it's rewarding, and you will have fun and you will meet amazing people.
Right. And also, it sounds like it doesn't necessarily need to be like a full-time gig. It could be, like you said, you have your day job, and then you can also express your creative side beyond that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I get enjoyment and fulfillment out of writing. The day job is just what I do to, pay rent and survive. It's kind of like that new Pixar movie Soul. What you do for a living isn't necessarily your calling. It's just what you do.
Right. How about you, Marv? Do you have any sage words for young people?
I meet a lot of would-be writers or upcoming writers or people who are trying, and they all say, I want to become a comic book writer. And they're sort of shocked when I say, no, you don't. You do not want to become a comic book writer. What you want is to become a writer who does comic books, and a writer who does TV, and a writer who does novels, and a writer. You should be writing everything, including comics. Comics is the thing I enjoy the most writing, but I write novels, I write theme park shows, I write all sorts of different things, because if you just do one thing, frankly, you get tired sometimes, and you get, like, I've done this a million times, but when you take on jobs in other genres or in other ways, I'm not phrasing this right, if you do other work as well, it actually helps your comic book writing. Each thing you do teaches you something about the next job. I learned more about comic book writing a few years ago when I started to do more novels, because the dialogue in novels has to be very specific towards so many different things, because you're not seeing pictures that augment the words. So in comics, you have that great thing where the artwork is there, and you can, as Nicole said, eliminate some of the dialogue.
Okay. And Jackie, any ideas?
To Marv's point a little bit too, like I definitely had I didn't start writing comics until my 30s. And I had already built a theme park career, and it was, parks in general tends to have as a career tend to have a lot of different variety within it of, like, are you writing rides? Are you writing museum exhibits? Are you writing stunt shows? Are you writing, sometimes you're like pitching literally a park in a city. There's all kinds of different things that you're dealing with. But I always wanted to write character-driven things. But as a young writer, I struggled a lot with, I have ADHD and never really had figured out quite how to manage it. So I would get really invested in kind of like coming up with some characters and writing some scenes, and then kind of just like losing it. And like it would go to the ether, and it would just be, and then I'd start new projects and never kind of get them finished. Plotting stuff was really hard for me. But writing on parks started to teach me, because like comic books, you have significantly fewer words to work with than you do with novels and fiction. With theme parks, a lot of times the words that you're going to write are only for the artists, and then you end up with a script that has, if you're writing Pirates of the Caribbean, there's a ton of pirates for you to write dialogue for. But if you're writing an attraction that has far fewer figures in it, which is much more likely with budgets nowadays, but you have such limited dialogue to explain to your writers what's happening, but they're not just there for thrills. If they're at a theme park, they're there to also get a little story. And you usually have like 3.5 minutes to get somebody through a story. So for me, like having that variety of types of writing, it taught me how to get much better at something that was just a weakness for me. And also like recognizing that your weaknesses are not, they don't have to stop you entirely from ever getting what you want, but finding ways to strengthen those things that are your weaknesses is a really big deal.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I always wondered, and I'd like to have people understand, that writing is just writing is in general the skill that could be applied to everything. So, another thing that I'm kind of curious about is going kind of in another weird direction is for properties and stories that you weren't necessarily a creator for. What type of special considerations do you have? Do you have to maintain integrity of the property, or can you go completely off base, or what limitations or considerations do you have when you decide you have to write a Batman story or something like that, right? Marv, why don't you start with that? Because I know you've written both your original stuff and other properties.
Well, if you're writing Batman, it has to work in the Batman universe, unless you make a deal with them that you're doing Batman year 12 and it's a special out of the continuity book. But for the most part, you can't be different from what the character is, what's acceptable. You can't suddenly have Superman do something that he would not do normally, because they'll read it and they'll go, he doesn't understand the character. They don't understand what the situation can do. They don't know how this is done. So you have to do it within the universe and still find something that they look at and go, this person's added a new wrinkle and it makes sense and it's a really good concept. And yeah, we'll try that person. We'll try that person now.
Okay.
So it goes back and forth, but you have to make sure you're on model.
Yeah, but I can see, you don't want to just tell the same old stories too. It's
No, you don't want to, but there's always ways to find new wrinkles on things. You brought up the Man and Superman graphic novel that I did, and that introduced a whole bunch of different things that we had never seen in Superman, and yet was totally within character and within story.
Can I say that's so impressive? Because Superman has been in so many, like every conceivable type of story situation, to that challenge is so specific with the characters that you work with, of like finding a new situation to put them in, and the way that character, to remain true to that character and have them handle that in a way that is new and gives readers a new kind of angle to see this character that they've loved for so long from. That is just like, that's incredible. Just want to put that out there.
The character is 80 something years old now.
Yeah.
And if writers didn't consistently and constantly find new places in their life to examine and to explore and everything, it would have been dead 30 years ago. These are good characters because they can be adapted and they can grow with the times.
Yeah. Nicole, do you have any ideas on that? I know you would Finn and Jake do anything silly, or that would be completely off market?
A lot of my work is in licensed properties, which always come with their fun and unique challenges of the fact that they're very widely known. And it's always difficult to balance staying in that universe and just going completely somewhere new. But I think it's also part of the fun challenge. And it always helps when you're a fan of the character or the property too, because it's like, what have I always wanted to see this character do or this character confront? And there's always just something special when you get the green light to be like, oh no, that is interesting. Let's go ahead and explore that. So it's, it can be a challenge, but at the same time, just sitting down and saying, what are the stories I'm the most interested in? What are the stories I like to read or consume or watch? And then figuring out, how you want your favorite characters to approach it. So
Cool. Any thoughts, Jackie?
I think, really lucky in that, like, my first kind of professional comic writing experience was stepping onto Goldie Vance, which is creator owned and not, it's not a huge property, but has like this stable of wonderful existing characters, but still let me, because I think that my first volume that I worked on, I was working on with Hope, and then kind of took on the next two volumes, sort of, I got to sort of fly free, but getting to not only explore what those characters would do in different situations, but to just kind of like play in that world, because Goldie is in this kind of like this kind of 60s, where an idealized 60s, where the kind of problems of the time are not really the problems that we're dealing with, but to kind of, I think some of my favorite characters that I played with was, we created these two bands for volume 4. And so it was like the Hummingbirds, which was this like really great all girl black rock band they were getting ready to do this festival, and I love them so much. And I had like the experience of getting to, like, because it's an existing property, there's an existing style, I kind of wrote up character descriptions, and then the artist, L Powers, sent back the character designs, and it was this moment of like, I didn't describe the characters visibly that much, but they are exactly what I was picturing in my head, like to the heights. Somehow she like just saw it. So that was such a cool experience. But like, there is this element of freedom when it's not such a giant property that's been around for a long time and doesn't have the same kind of corporate oversight. So that was just like a really great starting experience for me, because it was almost like training wheels.
Nice. Let's see. I'm trying to. So with the properties, that's interesting. Well, and Nicole, you kind of brought this up. It's fascinating to try to, see how you could push a character within the constraints of the idea of the property. What's one of the crazier ideas that you were able to get past, that you think was the most fun?
The most fun, I mean, it's probably the Lumberjane story I did. I did one of the summer specials.
Uh-huh.
And I said, they were like, well, why don't you pitch ideas to us? And I was like, well, what I really want to do is a Midsummer Night's Tale parody, with all of the craziness and the intersecting stories. And I actually got that approved. How that got approved, but I'm glad it did. That's probably one of the crazier ones, I think.
Well, you can't go wrong with Shakespeare, right?
Exactly. I was like, how do I do Shakespeare, but not like completely Shakespeare, but also like kind of Baz Luhrmann Shakespeare, but just without the Shakespeare, but also Shakespeare. So it was fun. The artist did a fantastic job, even though it was all over the place sometimes with where people were going. But that's probably the best example I've got. It's fun. You find something fun to do no matter which pitch lands. So that's why I always tell budding writers too, if you do get the opportunity to pitch, don't pitch something that you absolutely hate, because if they choose it, you're stuck writing it.
Nice. Marv, do you have any crazy stories that you were pitched that you thought maybe gone too far, but they said, yeah, that's great, go with that?
I'm sure there are, but if it doesn't get done, I tend to forget about it.
Okay.
The hard drive in my head isn't always functioning correctly.
That's fine. And Jackie, any ideas?
I just had a Soviet spy character that I put in that. It was the same volume 4 of Goldie Vance that was just kind of like rigid in a way that I wasn't even sure if it was going to come across as how funny he was, because like I'm picturing him as like a movie character, but Elle did like a perfect job of making him very funny, but like that he was just this very bad at being a spy and very clearly a spy, like, have some more gum, fellow American worker, but that people thought that was good enough to be and funny enough to like go into the comic book. I was like, okay, good. I'm pretty pleased with that. I wanted that to stick around.
Nice. So one thing that I always like to do is I can remember the first comic book that I ever read. Do you guys, can you remember back thinking about what was like the first piece of writing, let's say, if that you found kind of by yourself, and it's like, this is something that is really special. I really enjoy this. It could be a novel or a picture book, or if it's a Dr. Seuss or a comic or something like that. Can you think back of like a piece of artwork or storytelling that was really important to you as growing up? Let's start with you, Marv. Let's see. Can you remember your like entry into comic books and what made you think?
I remember that first story was carved into a cave wall in France, but that's about it.
Oh,
The watching the Superman, first of all, when I was growing up, obviously there were no superhero things outside of Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. Those were the only three superhero comics published in the entire business. And I had never heard of them. And I was watching the Superman cartoon, Superman live action show with George Reeves by accident. I didn't know what that was. I just didn't get up to change the channel. If we had remote controls back then, I never would have gotten into the business, because I watched Superman, the show that was on, and was just blown away by it. Because it showed imagination. So comics certainly influenced me in the very beginning. Later on, science fiction, the writer that I just utterly love, Alfred Bester, brilliant science fiction writer. And it turned out he had done comics back in the 1940s. I didn't know this, and created the Green Lantern Oath. He wrote he left comics, became an award-winning science fiction author, and brilliant writer, because he was the first one to show me how you can combine serious drama with comedy. That there'd be areas that you just start laughing all over because it's so beautifully done. And it doesn't take away from the drama of the story as well. Most writers were doing either one or the other. And he somehow got it so that you could do both. And that's sort of the way that I've always aimed my stuff at, because I love writing totally wacko stuff inside the supposedly serious stuff that we're doing.
Nice. Nicole, any ideas? Do you remember something that influenced you back in your formative times?
Oh man, I remember Dinotopia.
Okay.
And they had picture books, and then later they came out with very young reader novels, which I completely destroyed. Would go to the library constantly to see if there was a new one.
Yep. They're still popular.
Oh yeah, I have such fond memories of that, and just the power of what fiction can do, because it's like I'm never gonna get to meet a dinosaur, but I can go to the library anytime and read about the kid who befriends the pterodactyl. So yeah, and that it just snowballed from there. So
great. And Jackie?
I was definitely very animated movies kind of in general, like a lot of Disney stuff, but anything that was sort of big and cartoonish, I think drew my attention a lot, because the visuals of almost like the keyframes of things that happen, where there are so many poses within an animated dance sequence that just like really get me hype. I think there was a lot of stuff as a kid that I would watch and just be really energized and like feel like I could do it, even though animation it's so extreme. It's that push and pull over the top, but when it's the best animation, it feels like it could be possible. It feels like I loved Tiny Toon Adventures as a kid, and Babs Bunny was a quick change artist where she would just spin around in a circle and suddenly be a new character, which for me, I just loved that idea that you could do like instantaneous shifting or just create something so visually appealing and cool instantly. So I think just like a lot of animation really lit my fire as a kid.
Great. And of course, I want to let everybody know, and the attendees, that they can ask questions at any time. I'm kind of, asking all the questions here. So if you guys have anything you want to know, just text it down in the bottom on the Q&A, and we'll get to them. So, because that's one thing, yeah, because that's one of the things that I was laughing about. I remember one of my favorite comic books. But let's kind of go on the other side of the spectrum now. What right now are you watching or reading or experiencing that you think is great, and also that's something that kind of says that's a piece of great writing and work, and I would like to try to strive to be something like that, or create things like that. So is there anything new that you're thinking of that you're enjoying? Jackie, I'll start with you again. So, because you're.
I was just going to say, it's funny to me that everything that kind of popped to my head immediately was like, it wasn't writing at all. It was all like stunt choreography and fight choreography, and like animatics and things that are, that are all entirely visual. But Marv seemed like he was about to say something. So I'm curious. I always want to know what's up with Marv.
Well, there is so much now that is so good. Television is doing some incredible material, not only beyond what we ever saw on TV, but beyond what movies were doing. Great character stuff, great stories. I think this is absolutely the golden age of I don't know, what would you say, TV, movies, writing, art. It's all coming together now, and it's so imaginative and so different and very character driven, and also about all different types of people. And that's something we had never seen before. So,
yeah. Great. And Nicole, any ideas? What are you enjoying now?
What am I enjoying now? Oh, I just by the nature of my day job, because I work in consumer products for a large entertainment company, I watch a lot of cartoons. Just about anything animated. I mean, I'm a little biased because I've written for Steven Universe and regular show, but I still find myself going back and rewatching.
Okay. Well, the music in Steven Universe is the best.
Yeah. I mean, as for the new stuff, Bob's Burgers is always good. I'm actually surprisingly really enjoying that Mighty Ducks series on Disney Plus. Like, I did not expect to enjoy that as much as I am. So, yeah.
I wanted to speak to the writing on Steven Universe a little bit, just because I found the way that they would kind of break TV formula really refreshing, and kind of like the amount of emotional content that they were able to fit into like 11-minute episodes was just remarkable. Like all the animation and music and everything else aside, they did some really, really incredible stuff with characters in that show. I'm specifically thinking of the Here Comes a Thought episode that I cannot remember it's like a very, very impressive 11 minutes about mental health, and the story of like where Connie is experiencing a smaller, more kind of kid-focused mental health issue that then turns into, it feels like its own contained episode, but then there's still the second half where Steven is dealing with this huge like world-ending issue, but it's kind of the same. And they're able to use the like strategies that for both of them to like come down from a panic. And it's 11 minutes. And it is just incredibly done. And part of it is because they kind of don't worry about like having to have a beginning and middle and end and sort of a platform at the end of the episode where everybody sort of sits around and sort of talks about the lessons they learned. It just like kind of, it gets to the end and it's over, which is fine because they did so much work. And anyway, just like I could go on and on about all the different impressive things they did in that show.
Great. Actually, I have a question that I remembered that I've always have been curious about, and it comes with characterization. I know, Marv, that Raven is one of your great characters that you've created. How do you channel a angsty goth teenage girl when you're not like the furthest from that? But ultimately, yeah, how do you portray realistically a character that is so outside of what you actually are, is what my ultimate goal, my question is.
I would find as a writer, if I was only writing characters that are like me, I'd be bored real fast.
Yeah.
you explore other people. You get into what they thinking, what they like, what they don't like, why they like it, how they relate to other people. When you're putting together a number of characters, you're trying to figure out each part of their life. You're not going to get it all because it's going to take time, but you'll do enough that you could start the character off and, okay, Raven was instantly that particular character. She's not the character from the cartoon show. A lot of people think that she's snarky and all that, but the comic book was not that. I love the character in the cartoon show, but that's not what we were doing. It's really just analyzing the characters as if they were people. And as I say, figuring out what they like, what they don't like, who they are, how they react, what's the things that they care about, what are the things they don't like in the slightest. Every step of it, the same way in many ways that you may deal with people you meet, real people that you meet. You start figuring out who they are. You don't know it all at first, but you'll slowly start learning things about them. Probably in the beginning, the stuff that you share in common. Later, you start to figure out the things that are different about you and separate you. And when creating a character, you need to do the same exact thing, because stories are about characters. They're not about things. They're not about, I always say that they're not about a chair. You know, they're about the man who makes the chair, the woman who delivers the chair, the guy who sells the chair, it's all about the people. And the chair is only a convenience. It's the thing that takes you from scene to scene to scene. So you deal with things that are only about the people, and you care about the people, and you go from there.
Great. Any other thoughts, guys? Jackie?
I sort of find that I think of, as characters start to form, that I almost think of them in the way that I think of friends, like my friends and people who I know in my real life, in that instinctually, a lot of times you'll be able to tell when something is off with a friend of yours, even if they're very different from you. You know them, you know enough about who they are as a person to know when something doesn't feel right. And so that kind of, like, if you have a character who is behaving in a way that's not normal for them, as a writer, you need to either, there needs to be a reason for that. Are they dealing with some kind of emotional issue, or have you made a mistake? Because sometimes you get started on writing something and you realize that, like, this isn't really true to what this character's reaction would be to the situation as is. So either the situation needs to change or the character's reaction needs to change. And I think that's sort of, because it feels, for me, it becomes very instinctual of, like, he wouldn't say that. Like, I wrote the wrong thing there. He wouldn't say that. And it feels the same way as, like, if your friend says something off, you just kind of know when something is going on.
Can I add something back? One of the things we did early on in the Teen Titans is George Perez, the artist, drew a scene in an airplane. And the shot was just an airplane from the outside flying. And each character, I had them all talking. You don't see anything but the airplane, but you have to, without ever mentioning anyone's name, the way they answered the questions or spoke told you who they were. And when you can actually get your characters to do that, when their speech patterns, when their thought patterns are so clear that you could do something like that, you've developed a good character. So you know Raven by the way she spoke. And it's not just the fact that in our stuff, she never spoke with contractions, but different ways of phrasing sentences. And each character has a different way that they would approach the same exact sentence. And by putting the 6 balloons across the top of the airplane, nobody was confused as to who was speaking. And we were absolutely adamant that no names would be used.
Nice. Any thoughts, Nicole?
I mean, to build off of what Jackie and Marv have both been getting at, it's, each character has their own voice, and sometimes it's just a matter of, when you're writing, remembering those voices. And also, just part of the beauty of, like, writing comics especially, is that you do have other people to help guide you when you have gone off that track. Like, my editors have helped me so many times, like, okay, this is good. I get where you're going at, but perhaps we should, rein it back in. And, this isn't something a 10-year-old would necessarily say. It's more, a 17 or 18-year-old would say. So how can we get the same point across? But as a 10-year-old, so it's that's part of the fun of writing, honestly. It's
to inhabit another person, so to speak, right?
exactly.
Yeah. So we're getting some questions in after my furtive plea. So unfortunately they're all anonymous, so who knows who's submitting them. But one of the questions is, what other artists inspired you when you were first starting? Who inspires you now? So you could take one or both or them. Let's go back with you, Nicole, and see what we talked a little bit about that already, but what artists inspire you when you started out, and currently, who inspires you?
Oh man, I mean, I grew up on the golden age of like Disney.
Yep.
So Disney animation, especially the stuff before like 2010, just had a different like feel. Like that's where you start getting all of those like unique character designs from. But for who inspires me now, I mean, I have to say my current favorite comic artist is probably Ramon Perez.
Okay.
His line work's amazing. He used to do trading cards for, I believe it was Magic, but it's just his ink work is absolutely fantastic, and the way that he combines traditional inking and watercolor. I love it.
Great. And Jackie?
I get there was a lot of animation influences growing up. I always tend to like blank out on this anytime this question gets asked, and you'd think that I'd go back and like have a list that I could refer to, but it's always this like, I don't remember. But like I read a lot of like varied stuff because I was watching Disney movies and I was reading John Grisham and like just like a lot of different weird stuff. So there's just a bunch kind of in my past, but kind of some of the stuff more recently that I find that inspires me is some of the newer cartoons like Adventure Time and Regular Show and Steven Universe that are Infinity Train was one that I wanted to talk about too. That really is really great, and the writing has been very exciting for me lately. But that are sort of breaking out of molds and it's sort of escaping formulaic stuff with the intent of just like expanding creativity. Because I feel like there's a sort of tendency to be more perfectionist and work on the thing until you release your magnum opus. Whereas it feels like on these shows, it's more like we want to move fluidly and expressively and create comedy and creativity all just like as kind of not unpolished but unforced and uncompressed as possible. And that is something I've always struggled with, so it's really cool to see it out in the world, and makes me want to expand my own creativity more. So I definitely am inspired in that way.
Great. And Marv, anything that you liked as a child and now?
Oh, there's so many. Because when I started again, there weren't that many books out there. So people like Carmine Infantino and Gil Kane and Joe Kubert were the ones that I tended to see. Within a few years, it was Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko. Ditko was really interesting because his art was very bizarre. It was sort of wacky, but he was the first one to move the human body to define the personality of a character. He was doing things that nobody else did. His actual drawing isn't bad, but it wasn't brilliant, but his thinking process was just incredible. Later on, Bernard Krigstein, who most people would have no idea who he was, but he was an EC artist and utterly brilliant. His layouts and design still have not yet been matched after all these years. There's a story he did called Master Race that is used all the time to show artists how to do it. Just a brilliant artist. Today, I can't give you the names, but I can tell you I am seeing some of the most incredible art that I've ever seen in comics before.
Great.
There are so many people today who are doing utterly unbelievable jobs. I think the best that comics have ever been. I just can't remember their names at the moment, which is real sad, because they all deserve to be just hailed as brilliant, brilliant artists.
Great. Thank you. And then we have some more questions. Do you have a hard time scheduling time for working on projects and time for work and life? I know that's a really interesting question, especially, with COVID and lockdowns and things like that. How about it, kind of address that and how it also, pre and post COVID, if you can maybe just touch on that quickly. And who wants to jump in on that?
I can go. I have so many thoughts about
Oh, okay.
scheduling things. I mentioned before the ADHD thing. COVID has been very difficult for me because self-motivation is a struggle. But one of the things that I did is I started working on a project with a partner. Partnering is a huge deal. And when we're working on plot things, we're working on it together. We're on the phone actually doing the thing, and we schedule that time in advance. We call each other, we put it in the calendar, put everything in your calendar, including, and this is important for some people, I think a lot of times artists especially, but schedule your free time, put it on your calendar, because if you don't have anything in there, you're just going to fill it up with work potentially. A lot of people do that. And if you don't save a spot for that, there's a lot of just not protecting your own needs sometimes, I think, and recognizing that sometimes you need to give yourself time outside of your creative space to just go consume something, relax, watch a TV show that really inspires you, but or read a comic book that really inspires you. But scheduling and using the technology that we have at our fingertips nowadays has been really, really hugely important for me in managing my own executive function issues.
Great. Marv, how well, you're mostly a man of leisure now, aren't you?
No, not at all. I'm currently writing 2 video games, so
Oh, awesome.
You don't always see my comic book work because I don't do as much, but I do tons of other stuff. I've always been pretty much a 9-to-5 type guy. I start in the morning. These days I'm a little bit slower, but start in the morning, break for lunch, break for break, and finish up about 5 or 6 o'clock. If I have a massive deadline, I will push it to it has to be in. You don't have a choice about that. So, but for the most part, I'm a fairly fast writer, so I can get most of the work done. These days it runs very differently. One of the games, for instance, I'm writing the dialogue and script and everything for that, but the other one I'm a consultant on. So you have to block different times and think about them differently. One you have direct effect over, and the other you can make only suggestions on. So it's always interesting, and I love writing video games anyway. I've done about a dozen of them.
Great.
So, yeah.
Great. And Nicole, any thoughts?
Yeah, constantly. I mean, my full-time job is busy and hectic and stressful. So some days I end on time, some days I go late with that, and then have to leave that, get dinner, and then jump right into a deadline that I have. So I mean, it's a struggle. I'm fortunate enough that I have a group of friends that are understanding when I end up having to cancel plans, because it's a deadline. I can't miss the deadline.
Okay.
But it is always a struggle. I mean, the advice of making sure that you schedule some free time is important, because it's really, really super easy, especially with COVID lately, to just be in the house all day, every day. So I like to try to change it and work outside every once in a while so that it feels like it's different. So
Great. Well, we'll ask one more question, and then it'll be pretty quick because we're getting close to 5 o'clock. it'll be, so this is another one that the crowd has asked. Do the panelists have any dream properties, intellectual properties that they haven't worked on yet? You know, any Star Wars or Marvel things or whatever, you know, any properties. So we'll continue with you, Nicole, and then go to Jackie and then Marv, and then we'll give away the prizes and call it a night.
I mean, I know I've got several friends who are watching this on here who literally already know what I'm going to say, which is Hawkeye. I absolutely adore Hawkeye. He's my favorite. Everything with Hawkeye.
Okay.
Kate, Clint, Barney, just, yeah.
Oh,
So,
any Hawkeye.
any of them, all of them.
Okay, Jackie. Yeah.
Avatar, the bending variety, not the tall blue people variety. Just like the world of Avatar and bending and kind of the world building that they've done between the two existing series. I just would
Okay.
love to play in that, and the character stuff they've done. Also great. Be so fun.
Okay. Yeah, we're trying to, we want to get Gene Yang, who does the comics for Avatar, to come. He's up in the Bay Area, so we'll see. And Marv, is there any property you haven't worked on that you, you would love to try?
The only one that I always wanted to do, because I've done all the others in one way or another, is oddly enough Popeye.
Oh.
He's the only one left. I've written all of the Disney stuff. I was editor of most of the Disney stuff.
Yeah.
I've written most of the comic book characters, Daffy Duck, Bugs Bunny, all of those. The only one that I grew up with that I haven't written is Popeye, and I like Popeye.
Well, Popeye's great. So I want to let everybody know that thank you all for attending. We'll do a little more house cleaning at the end. We have a book partner that we've been that we're working with named Creating Conversations. We've put a link in the chat, so you can buy works from our three friends here through them, and also works from all the other panelists that have participated over the week. So definitely, we love supporting a local small booksellers and small libraries. So if you want anything that was talked about, from these creators, go to the link in the thing for Creating Conversations. And then let's give away some swag. So for the Rebirth graphic novel, that goes to the attendee named Bell, Bell. And then for the hashtag murder funding, that goes to the attendee Val Hutchins. And finally, for the Cool Avengers poster, that goes to Logan Mauro, Mauro. So thank you and congratulations, guys. You'll get there's a link in the chat, library programs at cityofmissionviejo.org. Give us an email. We'll tell you how you can retrieve them. They're waiting for you at the library as we speak. So come Tuesday when we open up again, because we're closed today and tomorrow, come by and pick it up. Any last thoughts before we call it a night, guys? And other than great time, and hope we do this again next year.
I want a complete list of Marv's video games.
Same.
I want to play them.
Well, maybe Marv can set that up, and we can, you can email it to me, and I can send it to you guys.
That would be fantastic.
Mickey Mouse, the third Mickey Mouse one. Oh God, there's so many. As I say, about a dozen of them.
Okay.
Cool.
Nice. Well, and hopefully
send me a letter and I'll answer by email.
Great. Well, thank you guys again, and have a good evening. And I hope just to communicate with you throughout the year, and fingers crossed next year, 2022, we'll have a live Comic Fest at our library. Thanks, guys, and then hopefully see you soon.
Thanks for
so
having
much,
me.
everybody. Yeah, thanks for having us.
All right. Good night, guys.
Have a good night. Bye.